Yo, what's going on YouTube, and welcome back to another Destiny video, and another Tuesday weekly reset. As always, the reset has just dropped, and I'm here to give you the lowdown on everything you need to know this week, Heroic, Nightfall, and what or whether or not there are any new noteworthy events this week. So firstly, on the topic of noteworthy events, I'm afraid there's nothing lined up this week, no Inferno, no Iron Banner, and definitely no Queen's Wrath. So it's just another regular week in the Destiny universe. Although, speaking of the Queen's Wrath, I put up a video on Saturday about when we can expect to see the Queen's Wrath event return, so if you want to check that out, then I'll leave a link to it both at the end of this video and in the description box down below. But, with that out of the way, all we have to talk about this week are the weekly activities. Now, Mega Man EXE4 did swoop in last week with a prediction, and this is something that Bungie have been trying to crack down on, so when he did come out with it, it was a little unexpected. But, he predicted that this week's strike would be Meridian Bay on Mars, and that the Heroic would carry Light Switch, and that the Nightfall, among a few other things, would have no burn. And, with that in mind, the weekly strike is Meridian Bay on Mars. Good game, Mega Man, good game. So, knowing that, let's take a quick look at the Heroic and the Nightfall. The Heroic, as mentioned, just carries Light Switch, meaning that minions of the darkness deal much more melee damage. And as for the Nightfall, well, you already know there's no burn, but the modifiers this week are Epic, as always heavily shielded and highly aggressive enemies appear in great numbers, Light Switch, again minions of the darkness deal much more melee damage, Angry, minions of the darkness won't flinch even after massive damage, and Juggler, no ammo drops for your equipped weapon, so just make sure you have a rotation going and that won't be a problem. Now it's also worth noting that in the most recent Bungie weekly update, they stated that in patch 1.1.2, Valus's health is going to be reduced by 1/3, making the boss battle on the Meridian Bay Mars strike much shorter, much less boring, and in turn reducing the overall completion time for this strike down from around 27 minutes to a more manageable time in line with the other strikes. But it is worth noting that that update is coming with 1.1.2 and does not apply to this week. I imagine the reason they dropped this strike this week was so that people can have one last feel of what it's like to fight Valus on full health, and I wouldn't be surprised if we then saw this strike again in a couple of weeks with a similar setup so that people can experience firsthand how the 1.1.2 update has changed this fight. Either way, with no burn, you really are free to use whatever weapons you like this week. So for this week's recommendations, I think it's probably easier if I just tell you what I'm going to be running with, and you can go from there. In my primary weapon slot, I'm going to be running with Word of CROTA. Why? Partly because it's a good hand cannon, but also because the Scions carry Void Shields, so it'll make light work of those. In the secondary slot, I'll carry Icebreaker for the most part, because the ammo regen is extremely useful, plus the Centurions have Solar Shields, so it'll make light work of those. However, once I get to Valus, I plan on switching to the Black Hammer, simply because if you can get yourself in a good enough spot, you can land consecutive crit shots without too much trouble. And then in the heavy slot, I'll run with the Song of Urgut for the most part, but then when I swap out my Icebreaker for the final boss, I'll also whack on GJALLARHORN, and that'll also help burn down Valus's health a little bit quicker. And with that, that brings me to the end of this video. Apologies, there's not really much else to talk about, but this week is just a regular week. Hopefully this week's Bungie update brings with it some more good news, and we'll actually have something to talk about next week, but for the time being, that, my friends, is it. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, hopefully you found it helpful, and as always if you did, it'd be awesome if you could leave a like and hit that thumbs up button, and if you aren't already subscribed and you're not already part of the Arekkz Gaming Nation, then make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can join up, become a valued member, and so you don't miss a single video. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys are going to be running with this week, what is your weapon loadout, and thank you very much for watching, take it easy, catch you next time, peace out.